Who here is from? Who here is a Clint Eastwood fan? Anybody here Clint Eastwood fan? What's your favorite movie?
The Mule.
The Mule. How about who else was? Josie Wales. I'm a big The Good, the Bad, and Ugly, 1966. That was one of my favorites. And then the Gran Torino. The man's 91. Okay, I'm a fan of his movies, but more importantly, the fact that he's 91 and he's starting a new movie the next week. How many guys know of a farmer? Like, the man can kick my ass at 91. You know what I mean? The thing is, how many guys are from farm families back home? Everybody here, pretty much. How many people here have a farmer back in their rural community that's like Clint Eastwood, still kicking ass and taking names? Everybody, a couple of guys here. How many people, when they hit 91, want to be like Clint Eastwood? Still farming, kicking ass, taking names, right? How many people here know of a farm family where they have somebody in their family that's stubborn like Clint Eastwood? Right? How many people here how many people here would like to go out for a beer with Clint Eastwood? I would, right? But the question is, how many people would like to be stuck behind a barn trying to farm with a guy like Clint Eastwood? And I'm not saying it's because of his age. There's lots of guys that are 25 that think they're Josie Wales, right? And that's the conundrum we have in farming, is one word. And that word is... Alrighty then. That word is stubborn, okay? And the conundrum of our times, I mean, we talk about GPS tractors, we talk about GMO technologies, and yes, they're game-changing technology, but we never thought through the fact that back in the 60s, back when Clint Eastwood did The Good, the Bad, and Ugly, most guys, when they hit their 60s, they would retire because their hips were shot. Nowadays, when Dad hits 60 and he's got a bad hip, he goes in for hip replacement, or gets a piece of cancer taken out of his body, or gets a new heart stent. And he's farming to his 80s and 90s. And the conundrum of our time, can I get a marker? The conundrum of our times is the fact that we got a situation where there's not one generation farming at a time. We got a situation where there's two, if not three generations farming together. And we got a situation, what's the term you guys would hear about the neighbors? Too many chiefs, not enough Indians, right? We got a situation on most family farms where we've got everybody butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, right? And what we've, thanks very much, appreciate that. What we've never recognized is that the amount of money that's being lost because of this. Because you got a situation, most family farms, where everybody's butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And half the potential profit is slipping between the cracks. Sometimes it's because of the bickering between family members, where it's more important to be right than for things to be right. And then there's a lot of times when you're getting along great and you don't want to rock the boat. And you see something that bothers you, but you just let it go. And there's half the potential profit slipping between the cracks. More importantly, half the time, when you're bickering and butting heads, half the time you're going home frustrated. And 25% of farmers are taking pills for depression because of that. It's a bad situation that we don't talk about in the rural community, especially at church. I come from a stubborn family myself. This is how we...
Just right on the other one.
Alrighty then. You guys pay tuition for a reason. Wow. There's two words I want you guys to never forget today. And I guess you guys won't forget next week either. I come from a little town called Caygeon. Everybody calls me Caygeon. Does anybody here know where Caygeon, Ontario is? You do? Where are you from?
Brantford, Ontario.
You know where I'm from. Now, for those of you that don't know where Canada is, it's that country to the north, okay? Ontario is the state east of Detroit, okay? For about 3-hour drive straight east of Detroit, it is really good farmland. It's just the same as Iowa. It's about 200 bushel corn, corn, beans, wheat rotation, a lot of hogs, a lot of dairy farms, some chicken farms too, right? It is just like Iowa. Now, how many people have been up fishing in Canada? couple people been out fishing in Canada. Where I'm from, it's not really known for good farmland. It's known for great fishing, right? Describe the land where you went fishing.
Lots of lakes.
Lots of lakes,
Rivers.
lots of rock, lots of trees. Bob Caygeon, my people were stubborn. Back in 1832, the first white man killed in the township was in the back end of my farm. I was brought up to believe that he died so I could have the right to farm. And we are stubborn people. You guys had your form of pest control here in Iowa is using pesticides occasionally. Where I'm from, growing up, we were lucky to get 75 bushel an acre corn. Growing up as a child, I was 10 and 12. They sent me out in the field with a tin bucket and rocks. And it was my job to go through the cornfield. I had 22 in my hand. I was allowed to shoot the coons, but I was told not to shoot the bear. My uncle and my dad were on the edge of the cornfield, and our form of pest control was me chasing the bear out of the cornfield, and my dad and uncle would shoot the bear. You've heard of the movie Deliverance? Well, my family was exactly like that, except for we don't pick the banjos, we play the fiddles. That's the only difference, right? Nobody's married outside of a 7-mile radius for 7 generations. And I was brought up, the year that I left for college, 18 herds of cattle were sold. Everybody was getting out of farming. I heard from all my cousins and grandma, and everybody else said, it's a shame that no young people are getting into agriculture. I was the youngest of all my kinfolk, and it was brought up to me that it was my responsibility to carry on a 7-generation tradition for another 7 generations. So I went off to agriculture college, sat in the same type of classroom as you at the University of Guelph. The day I left for college, though, my mother, she showed me the farm financials. And she says to me, if you don't fix these numbers, I'm leaving your father. No, I'm going to be paid as a motivational speaker. My mother, she's one heck of a motivational speaker. So I went off to Guelph to save the family farm. And when I was there, I met somebody similar to Tony, Dr. Rich Vine. His dad's name's Tony, sorry, I know. We did a one-on-one course. You know how you do your final year course where you write a business plan in college as part of the farm management diploma? I started on my business plan the first week I was at school. And I, every morning, would be the first one in the university library at 8 o'clock, midnight, be the last one to leave. Every day except for Sundays. And I did that, and my roommates, when I was in dorms, when they went to go home to the final semester, we had to write these business plans. They did their plan the night before it was due. Remember James, he did his dad went and built a hog barn because of it. Snuffy, he did a chicken barn. He started 2 days before it was due, and he went home and built that chicken barn. I gave my dad that 200-page plan that had 5 Tupperware containers full of photocopied information and data, figured out how to make that farm work. My dad looked at the cover of it and threw it straight in the fire. After that, we had a lot of fights. And my Uncle Claude, he stepped in and he said, well, why don't you give the boy the field behind the barn? He can try out his ideas there. If they work, great. If they don't, it's only 4 acres. So that's what we went and did. And by August, we had a big birthday party for my Uncle Claude. He had the cancer. And he walked that field, and he asked me some pretty hard questions, and he was really impressed with what he heard. And he came in the house. My dad was washing his hands, and my uncle slapped him on the back. He says, you know, your boy's going to make more money off of that 4 acres than you're going to make off the entire farm this year. And Claude just laughed. He thought it was a big joke. He was really proud of me. You wouldn't believe this, but a couple days later, my dad, he plowed down my crops. And nobody in the county could understand why. And after that, just things went from bad to worse. We had a succession planner come out to the farm eventually. And my dad was there for about 20 minutes, and then he walked out. And my mom went out in the porch, as my dad was leaving the house, and she yelled, "Do not buy any more farming equipment until you got a written budget and business plan with your son." And my dad, he went to an auction sale, and he bought himself a manure spreader, and he came home with that manure spreader. I guess you could say that shit hit the fan. And you know, if you can't laugh at the way your parents got divorced, who can you laugh at, right? But it wasn't a very funny situation for about 10 years because my parents didn't officially get divorced. And during that 10-year period, it was, I did everything from doing the 10-year strategic plan for Pfizer Animal Health for the feedlot industry in Alberta to milking goats for $10 an hour. But what continued to happen was as soon as I got going in my life and my career, my dad would call and I'd be home. And we'd go for about 6 weeks, and then my dad would get through whatever crop he needed put in or taken off, and he'd leave me on the side of the road, literally, with nothing. And this went on, and then when my parents finally got divorced, I said, like, by my 35th birthday, we've got to get the succession planning sorted out. How are we going to continue the 7-generation tradition for another 7 generations? Or else I'm going to kill myself. When I first started saying it, I didn't mean it. On my 35th birthday, I found myself sitting on the barn beam with a rope around my neck and the .22 I grew up with on my lap. And I don't know if I was there for 20 minutes or 2 hours. I don't know how long I was in there. You see, the thing is, you guys seen the signs, Faith Family Farm? I was going to have that as a tattoo if I believed in tattoos. That was everything to me. That was everything to me, Faith Family Farm. And none of my family cared to step in and try to sort things out. And I spent 15 years trying to do the right thing always. And my whole faith in God was on the edge. And I was sitting on the edge of that barn beam. And I sat there, I don't know how long. But the thing is that I was losing my faith in God. And I don't know how to explain it to you, but God overwhelmed me in that moment. And I walked out of there with a whole different perspective of life. You see, the thing is, you only have to tell one friend in confidence that your parents got divorced over a manure spreader for everybody in 5 counties to know. And so for that 15-year period, all my friends, I was the guy that they called to have a beer with when they had problems farming. And I walked in that barn feeling sorry for myself because it was a pretty extreme situation I went through. But I couldn't get my mind off of the friends that I had that also were having problems working with their families. And I realized that, you know, for me, you have to understand, University of Guelph, 12,000 students. I don't think anybody knew my name was Mark Andrew Junkin. Everybody thought my name was Bob Caygeon. I was so proud of where I was from. I didn't care about you knowing my name. I cared about the fact that you knew that I was going home to carry on a 7-generation family tradition. It was the center of my identity. Since I was 10 years old and in 4-H, all I cared about was knowing that I was from Bob Caygeon and I was carrying on a 7-generation tradition. If I wasn't Mark Junkin to Bob Caygeon, who the hell was I? And I sat in that barn beam. I started thinking about my friends. And I realized that what made my family successful was the fact that we were stubborn. What caused us to fail was the fact that we were stubborn. And somebody had to fix this root issue of how stubborn farm families work together. And I walked out. I had given away everything except for that fiddle. It's still in my car. And I had $2 left. And I walked out of that barn, and I realized I had my middle name was Andy. So ever since then, I've gone by Andy Junkin, and I've become a different man. My entire life, I've never been back to Bob Caygeon, and I'll never go back until my boys spread my ashes. And my whole purpose in life is to help as many stubborn farm families work better together. So I spent 2 years, again, at University of Guelph. In the library, I didn't pay tuition. Sorry about that, University of Guelph. But I studied to become an expert in farm succession planning. And then I opened a little office in a little town called Mitchell, Ontario, which is the heart of the Corn Belt. And I went to church. I had CKNX is a local country music radio station that has the farm market reports. So I went on the radio as the Ask the Expert hour. And it was playing at 10 o'clock in the morning. And as it turned out, there was a farmer, we'll call him Jack. That's not his real name, but this is a real story. Jack had just had a fight with his son. And he was in the shop listening to the radio program, and as I left, he called me up on the phone. So I went to meet with Jack, and then I met with his son later that day. And that was a Saturday, and so on Monday, we're going to sit down and sort things out. And so I was sitting in the Christian Reformed Church in Stratford, Ontario. My buddy Jan, his child was getting christened. And there was quite a few christenings that day, and the church was packed. And I don't know about you, but I'm the guy that walks in about 3 minutes before the church service starts. And so they sat me in the middle. There was no other seat but dead center in the middle, right? So anyways, I'm sitting there, and just as a preacher started a sermon, a phone went off. I was like, who is that jerk that didn't turn off his phone? And then I realized that I had bought a phone 2 weeks before, and it was in my suit pocket. And so it rang again. Everybody was looking around, so I went to turn it off, threw it in my pocket, went down my shirt. I'd actually hit the speakerphone. I didn't know how to use the Apple phone that well. I'm not very tech savvy. And it was Jack. And they say that you could hear it in the back foyer what he was saying. And excuse me for cussing, but this is exactly what he said. He said his name very loudly. And then he said, if you don't knock some goddamn sense in this asshole son of mine, I've got a rifle and I'm going to use it on myself and nobody else. His son had just gone to college 4 years before. His son had come home, they milked 60 cows, and Jack had spent his entire life building up that operation to give to his son. They already did succession planning. They transferred 30% of the assets into his son's names. And Dad had a vision, and the son wanted to expand to a 120 cow dairy barn. And for 3 years, 2 best friends became worst enemies. And they got to the point that Jack made that call. And so I realized at that moment that all that studying I'd done in the university library meant nothing. And the only way I was able to sort out that situation was that I didn't leave, even though my life was at hand. And I was able to empathize in their situation. Thank God we were able to sort that situation out. But the thing is that because everybody in the Dutch community in Western Ontario was in that church service that day, I got the reputation for turning around the most dire situations. And then one thing led to another. And you guys are from across North America. I've probably been helping one family member or somebody in your church all across North America ever since. That's been 13 years ago that I was on Jack's farm. But I've been turning around the most dire situations ever since. And I used to take a picture of the farms that I'd leave. And I'd take a picture of the mailbox, being so proud of myself, thinking, oh, I just saved a family farm today. I used to collect those pictures of those mailboxes. But the problem I kept on having was I kept on getting called back to these farms about 2 years later. And I sorted the problem out that day. But the thing is, has anybody, I'm not going to ask the audience this because I don't want you to tell anybody. But the thing is, if you've ever been in a family mediation session, everybody's got their arms crossed. And quite often I would get calls from guys like Jack, come fix my son, come fix my daughter-in-law, come fix my dad. And everybody would be sitting around the kitchen table, and they'd all have their arms crossed, And they all be pointing fingers at each other. And they'd all be expecting everybody else to change, but they wouldn't. They might make some changes if this guy does that, but 6 months later, you might go 3 steps forward, but you go 6 steps back. And I was sitting there at a family I had sorted out just 2 years before. Does anybody have a Bible or Bible on their phone? Matthew 7:5. This is probably the most important verse you guys will come across in your farming careers. Matthew 7:5. What does it say? What does it say?
You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
Now, this is a Christian college we're speaking at today. And I don't care if you're a Christian or not, those are wise words. See, the only way you're going to take a partnership and fix it, fundamentally, is if everybody's focused on everybody's focused on controlling the other person. That's what happens on family farms. We try to control each other and we try to manipulate each other. It's only when you yourself identify that there's about 5% of what I do that could be tweaked and be improved upon, and see farming as a challenge to become a better person, that you're actually going to fundamentally change the dynamics of a family farm. Okay? My ancestors came over from Ireland in 1832. And we talk about pioneer days. We have a big pioneer village. I can go through that pioneer village. I'm related to every building, and can tell you a story about it. But what we don't talk about in the pioneer days is the fact that half the people that came went back to Europe or went to the cities. For each generation of farmers, half don't make it. And why is that? I mean, whether it's drought, whether it's farm economics, whether it's machinery, right? The root problem is that for each generation, you have your own set of challenges. And either you rise above it and become a better person, or it falls apart. What's the challenge for our generation, guys? You get a free T-shirt, by the way, if you answer. What's the challenge for our generation?
Technology.
Technology? Who said that? You get a free T-shirt. Sorry about that. What else? You get a free T-shirt anyways.
No one wants to work.
No one wants to work? I would say that we could go on for about 20 minutes here. But the root problem these hippies in California, they say that the family farm is dead. But the truth is there's never been a generation where the term family farm is more relevant. Because even though we might have corporate farms, right, we have multiple owners in a farm. That's what it means. And most of the times it's all family. And the challenge of our generation is turning working with family from weakness into strength. If you want a farm, it's not like 1966 with Clint Eastwood where you could go buy 100 acres down the road and get started. If you want a farm, you got to farm with your family. To do that, you got to turn working with family from weakness into strength. And the only way you're going to do that is the word stubborn. And that's what we got to stop. We got to stop being stubborn with each other. And we got to start being stubborn at the habits that make farms successful. And that's what I've been doing since. I developed a unique process. It's pretty simple, though. It's 3 things. I sit down with a farm family. I'm not Dr. Phil. I don't hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I just focus on money. Okay? Each meeting I have with a family, we've got to improve farm profit by $3,000. And if the family doesn't improve by $3,000, then you have to write a check to PETA. Okay? And the thing is, what I care about, it's great that you make $3,000. I mean, who doesn't want to sit down for an hour and get an extra $3,000 out of your operation? But what I'm trying to do is problem solve the root problems of how you problem solve together as a family. Instead of everybody having the attitude of, I'm smarter than you. Instead of everybody focusing on being right and things ain't right. Instead of you guys all trying to be smarter than the other guy, you got to start making smart decisions together. You got to get everybody from button heads and pulling the farm different directions. Get everybody on the same page and pull in the same direction. Another 2 things I do is each meeting I have, we just make one practical suggestion for how you guys improve, how you guys work together. And then I meet with your family 25 times over a year. And each meeting, behind the scenes, I sit down and talk to you on the phone and make you self-aware of a bad habit that you need to turn into a good habit, to turn working with the family, working with the farm, from a weakness into strength. And if, you know, it doesn't, I make it so it seems natural, like if a family friend is just there to visit. But the thing is, if you have 25 meetings over the course of a year, and you make those 3 improvements each meeting, that's over 75 improvements to how you guys work together. And your farm will be 200% better. You'll go from good to great. And I'll give you an example of a farm. We'll call them the Connell family. They're not the Connell family, but this is a real deal family. They called me February 1st, 2019, and there's several cousins in a farming partnership. They farmed over 10,000 acres. And they called me on February 19th, February 1st, because he called me about 20 minutes after the bank called him and told him that they pulled the financing. And in their county, they were the big players. And the bank had threatened to pull the financing for a while, and they didn't believe them. They were their biggest client. And I sat down with them, and it was just, these guys are just butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And all they wanted to, first of all, fire one of the family members because there was allegations of fraud. And they wanted to do debt refinancing right away. I said, no, guys. The first thing we got to do is everybody come to the table with one simple idea to improve farm profitability. Can't cost more than $1,000. Got to return 300%. And what we did over 6 months was we got these guys actually listening to each other first. And then when I got them short-term financing, made a few phone calls, got them $17 million just like that. But the thing is what we did first was got them listening to each other. And then when we sat down to do restructuring, it was a 3-hour conversation. And then 6 months later at Christmas, we did succession planning. And when I first met with the family, there was a nephew that was in his 3rd year of university. And he said, I love farming, but the farm's not profitable, and there's just too many people involved. Like, we still haven't done succession planning from the previous generation, let alone for me to have an opportunity here. And that kid is now home farming. And he's had 2 of his first cousins come home to, well, the second cousins, I should say. They've come home to farm too since then. What they've got into is a result of our discussions. In August that year, we had them brainstorm what they're going to do in the future. We got them into a value-added enterprise, and we got them into a niche crop. Their biggest concern now is they don't have enough acres to grow this niche crop. They're having to have the neighbors grow it for them as well. Things are just taking off like that. Why? Because we took them from button heads. They're all smart guys. It was just a matter of them combining their ideas to create something awesome. And now I told you where I'm from, as I said, there's 2 things, farming and fiddle playing, right? Has anybody here inherited a fiddle from the grandfather? We're in a room full of Dutch Calvinists, aren't we? So where I'm from, you always pass over the fiddle to your grandchild, right? So I'll play the fiddle. Now, I sound a lot better after 3 whiskeys. The thing is that to learn how to play a fiddle, now, the thing is, it takes about 10 years. Like, you play this thing. You sure?
I have no music ability.
Well, that's the thing, is that a lot of farmers think that one day they can go to the hospital for cancer, get bad news at the hospital, and they can just pass over the farm to the next generation. To learn how to, any fool can gift his sons or daughters a tractor. Very few farmers are successful in teaching their kids how to make that tractor pay. I have a 3.5-year-old named Huckleberry, and it drives me nuts trying to teach him how to play fiddle. Right? It just, wow, it's just like, it's even worse than my fiddle playing by a fraction. But the thing is, but I realize it's going to take 10 years for me to teach him. And the thing is that the more successful you are as a farmer, the harder it is for you to let go of control and to teach management wisdom. And that's because you're a doer, not a teacher. I had a buddy, I sat beside him in commodity trading. And I had the second highest mark in the class, and he had the first. And I happened to look over to his test one time, and he and I had the same answer by the end of the exam. I don't know how that happened. But the thing is, he was really sharp. We'll call him Mossum. That's not his name. But anyways, Mossum, he farmed, and he was 35. The previous 2 years, his dad had cancer. And so he took the crops off. He ran the farm. The only two things his dad did was the bookkeeping and the trading, because that's something a guy with cancer could do. And to write a check made the man feel powerful, even though his body was giving out. A year after, I was sitting in Malcolm's shop, or Mossum's shop, and he just broke down crying. And he said, I fudged up. And it took me about 5 minutes to get it out of him, but he had lost $500,000 in 3 months. Just like that. His dad had always done the trading. He hadn't. He had gotten the top class at University of Guelph 15 years before, but there's theory and there's practice. And the thing is, there's a lot of farmers that they go home and they get in the groove as, this is the jobs I do, this is the jobs dad does. And they just expect to take over what mom and dad does. It's going to be easy. How many parents, how many of your moms or grandmas do the books? Right? For a lot of farm wives, that's the center of their identity. They take a lot of pride in doing a good job of the books, and they do a great job. And their sons are in the shop and look at what mom does and kind of thinks, oh, that's just plugging in receipts into a computer. How hard can that be? There are days in every farm in the next 10-year window where you got to make 1 + 1 = 4. You got to pay some bills and you got to not pay some bills. That wisdom, you don't want to go to be buried 6 feet under. You know, these critical jobs. Has anybody heard of the third generation curse? What's the third generation curse?
First generation starts it, second builds it, third destroys it.
A lot of you guys are the third generation in this room. Or the fourth or fifth. It doesn't matter. The thing is that there's a lot of successful farmers in this room. And for you to learn critical jobs like doing commodity trading, for you to learn critical jobs like farm bookkeeping, as soon as you go home to farm, you got to, as a family, identify what are the critical jobs that cannot be transferred on the way to the hospital 2 months before mom and dad's funeral. What's going to take me 10 years to learn? If you can have that conversation up front, it's an uncomfortable conversation. Like I said, a lot of people, those critical jobs are the center of their identity, that what they like doing the most. But what's the sense in building up an empire if it's gone in 20 years' time after you're gone? It's like passing over a fiddle. Second thing, and the last thing I want to talk to you about, is the fact that most farm succession cases in North America today are a hostile takeover. Everybody does a big speech about how it's for the best at church, but a lot of cases it's ugly. There's a lot of farmers, it all becomes power and control. And as soon as the younger generation gets more ownership of the farm, Grandpa says something that Dad takes offense to, and suddenly Dad's not welcome on the farm. You got to get rid of this butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. You got to get rid of this being stubborn with each other. And you got to replace it with love. And the only way you're going to do that is by everybody being able to sit down and make decisions together to get everybody pulling in the same direction. I had a guy that There's two guys contacted me about 5 years ago. One guy never did work with me. One guy did. And roughly at the same time, their dads both died of cancer. And one guy, the guy that worked with me, he carried his dad into the combine in his last fall. Not because it was convenient, but because it was love. Because we got rid of them being stubborn with each other and started being stubborn at the things that really matter. If you want to turn your farm from a corporate farm into a real family farm, you've got to fix stubborn first. Now, 25 years ago when I was in a college class like yours, I would have said that everything I just said now was a bunch of BS. Okay, they made us take human resource classes. I thought that was the silliest thing ever. Right? I always thought it was about production efficiency. I thought about who had the largest farm economics. Let me challenge you. This is all a new concept about we got to fix the stubborn. We got to turn it from a bad thing to a good thing on your farm. But let me ask you this question, okay? Let's take two farms. One's worth $5 million. One's worth $40 million. Okay? Two guys in this class go home this spring. Okay? One guy is really infatuated with the guy with the $40 million. He thinks that what I just spoke about was a bunch of BS. The first thing he wants to talk to about his family is about a new piece of technology. The $5 million farm goes home. He says the first thing we've got to fix on this family is getting everybody from button heads to being able to sit down, listen to each other, get everybody pulling in the same direction. Now, let's say the next 10 years in the farm economy, 7 out of 10 years are tough. And there's quite a few years that both farms are bleeding. Economies of scale really doesn't matter. Both farms are bleeding. Okay. I got 3 questions for you. Who's going to be able to sit down and make decisions to improve the efficiencies to get by? The $40 million where everybody's butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions? Or the $5 million farm where they went from button heads to being able to sit down and make decisions together and pull in the same direction? My second question is this. Whose farm do you want to be working on for the next 10 years? The family where every day it's a fight, or the family that gets along? The third question is this. I don't know your family. But in order to be successful at farming, you've got to be a little bit stubborn. But my question is what type of stubborn are you going to be? Are you going to be stubborn with your family for the next 20 years? And if so, what are you going to have at the end of that? Or are you guys going to get everybody stubborn at the tough things to do that are necessary in order to have a successful partnership? My name is Andy Junkin. Everybody calls me Bob Caygeon. You guys can call me Caygeon. The main thing is, I don't care what you call me. The main thing is that you call me. And let's turn working with the word stubborn from a bad thing to a good thing on your farm. Thanks very much.
Hey, if you guys have some questions, if it's specific to your own family farm or just in general, Caygeon would love to help you out.
Yeah, in the back.
Do you work with ranchers at all? Or just
Oh yeah. I mean, I work with ranchers up in BC, British Columbia. I work with farms so I do it over Skype. I meet with families over Skype, right? And so what I do is a half an hour meeting once a week instead of me being at your farm for 10 hours and nothing getting done. And so I meet with your family every week or every other week, and we do that over a year. And so I do it with ranchers in British Columbia. I've got cotton farmers in Alabama. I've got every type of farmer you can think of. And the same process works regardless of what commodity. It's the science of decision making. Anything you can do to improve the quality of decision making, when you think about this, anything you can do to improve the quality of decision making, getting everybody from button heads, being able to sit down and make decisions together, that's going to skyrocket your farm's profitability and get rid of all that BS, and farming with family becomes fun again. Yeah.
what did your stand, because all your examples had to do with nails, what about
I work with a lot of female farms, and there's a girl named Darlene, and I was at her wedding. Her brother's wedding he was a good buddy of mine, and her brother said, "I'd like to thank Bill and the crew," and she's like, "I'm the crew." And she had been home from Ridgetown College for about 5 years. And everything she touched, and her dad basically walked out of the barn. She took over the herd health. And everything she touched turned to gold. And they actually had to get a new milk tank because she had improved production that much. She had 2 younger brothers. And they had made a lot of money that year. And she had she'd gotten some quotes. She wanted some ventilation for the calf barn, because they had a serious issue with calf ventilation. And she had gotten quotes, and she knew that they had, at the end of the year, they had some tax issues, so they had to reinvest some money in the farm. She got this, she spent a lot of time doing this research. She gave it to her dad in the milk house. He looked at it, put it in his back pocket, never looked at it. 2 weeks later, there was a combine showed up in the yard. She didn't know anything about it. And she flipped out. And she went to, by the way, she's telling me this after she drank a bottle of wine after that speech at her brother's wedding. And the thing is that she had gone to her mom, and her mom says, your brother Brock, or your boyfriend Brock, has a bigger dairy farm than us. Go there and make decisions there. Just don't rock the boat. It's Christmas time. You're probably going to get an engagement ring this sometime in the next couple of months. Go farm at Brock's. She's like, pardon me, I'm the oldest child. There should be my brothers are showing up to the barn at 9 o'clock in the morning to be dairy farmers, right? Not that ever happens. She says, why don't I have equal rate? And I said, the thing is about farming is her parents were very open-minded people. But there's 5,000 years of chauvinism clouding not just her dad's judgment, but her mom's judgment as well. And the thing is that I said to Darlene was, don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. And the sin is that you were not involved in decision making. And there's no sense in talking about you having equal equity in this operation until you are involved equally in decision making with the farm. Your dad talked about that decision to buy the combine with your brothers, not with you. Even though you're a major part of this operation, he thinks of you as the employee. And she wasn't getting paid the same as her brothers either, even though she was older and she'd been there for longer. So what we got them to do is start this process of sitting down on a weekly basis and making decisions together. And a year later, not only is she getting paid equally, she has 1/3 partnership in that new corporation they formed with her 2 brothers. The only way you can have as many women in agriculture conferences off the farm as you want. It's not going to do you any good. You've got to change the dynamics of decision making on the farm. And you've got to be involved in that meeting, right? Because the root issue you got to get rid of on your farm is that I'm smarter than you attitude. The other root issue is you got to be included at the table. And Darlene, what she did was she came to each meeting with her homework done. She's the CEO of that farm now. And that is how women have a future in agriculture. Okay?
You gave some examples about, where things have been going on for a while on farms and have been butting heads, and so
Yeah.
a lot of people in this room that might eventually be going back to the farm probably don't want to get to that point.
Yeah.
So you have some class.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that? So
I do. Okay. So first of all, everybody gets a free T-shirt when they go home. So if you guys want, they're at the back. They say stay stubborn. So the days that you want to communicate what you're thinking to your parents, 6 months from now, just wear the shirt. The thing is that there's also my book, Bulletproof Your Farm. Everybody goes home with a free copy. And inside is the instructions to how to go to a free course online. It's called Coming Home to Farm. Okay, so we started this with Washington Farm Bureau last year. and it's progressed. We're doing it with Mississippi, and I'm speaking at the National Farm Bureau in a couple weeks here about this course. And it's called Coming Home to Farm. So the thing is that nobody gets married thinking that they're going to get divorced, right? Nobody goes home to farm with their family thinking they're going to get divorced. And the thing is that this course is like a pre-marriage class before you get married to the farm. And instead of you guys having an ugly situation 20 years down the road, where for the next 10 years you're butting heads and pulling the farm different directions, we get your family to identify a few landmines ahead of time. And so you guys can take how you guys work together from good to great right off the start as you come home. And so that the next 10 years is fun instead of problematic. So it's a free course for the next year we're offering. You guys go ahead and take it, right? And how many people are going home in the next couple of years, right? I mean, after 20 years of taking guns, I mean, I've dealt with the most dire situations. And that's a nightmare you don't want to deal with. Get it proactively in place, the fundamentals. Take how you guys work together from good to great. Improve the odds. Yes, sir?
Your story is not very unlike mine, and it's kind of scary actually how often this happens. And having lived in a lot of places, it's very true.
Yeah.
The issue that we often run into as young people is we may understand this, but the generation or the two generations ahead of us are going to resist us. How would you encourage, other than just take the course, how do you start the conversation?
Well, I think the thing about succession planning at this stage, as I said a bit earlier, is about the transfer of assets. And it shouldn't matter how much equity anybody has on paper. What should matter is that it's us against the world. And you got to get rid of, succession planning for a lot of families is the ugly word nobody wants to touch, because what should matter to your grandpa is that he dies with his boots on instead of his slippers. And the only way that that's going to happen is if you're able to make joint decisions together as a family. Because if not, then he's not going to be welcome on the farm. So I think what you need to say out at the start is that I don't want to be like the neighbors. Let's get the fundamentals of how we work together. So it doesn't matter who's right. What matters is that we're making the right decisions. And so that the next 20 years of farming with you is fun. And in my opinion, that's the first thing you should talk about instead of what piece of technology to buy. Because if you get the fundamentals fixed as to how you guys make decisions together, getting that piece of technology is easy. If not, every decision is going to be bickering. Anybody else have any questions? One more. Come on, guys. Yes?
Where do you see agriculture like family farms like 10 years from now?
I think family farms are the root of agriculture. There may be some venture. Bill Gates might have his money in agriculture, but he's going to want to align that money with a family farm that's managing the operations. And so for outside investors be involved in family operation, if you can prove beyond any doubt that you're the top 1% in the state as far as management of the family farm, because you've gotten from bickering to being able to sit down and make decisions together, access to capital, whether it's from the bank or from private investors, is going to be there. So that's where I see the future of the family. The fundamentals of agriculture is the family farm. Is it just the question, is it going to be your family or not? And if you spend the next 10 years bickering, you're just not going to be in the game. I think the thing is that in high school, it used to be that, you try out for the basketball team, you just had to be better than the average. And I think the future of agriculture is that in order to get on the college team, you just used to have to be better than average, right? But nowadays, you want to go to a college level. I'm not saying if you want to go to a major college like Iowa State and even be able to try out for the basketball team, you've got to be in the top 10%, if not the top 1%. And I think it's the same case with banking. It used to be that banker said, like, as long as you're not in the bottom 10%, you're fine. You're not going to be on my list, right? You just have to be better than average to farm successfully. I think that in order to farm in the next 10 years and beyond, you got to be in the top 10%. And realistically, you got to be striving to be in the top 1%. And the only way you're going to be doing that is by having your decision dynamics within your family at a whole different level than everybody else. If you fix that, family Christmas will go smooth. If you don't, family Christmas won't. Right? Okay. So thanks very much, guys. I really appreciate it. So, and there's books at the back. And if you guys want a free copy of my next book, I always like to give out free copies just before I publish it. Sign up, give me your contact information. I'll send you a free book. Okay? Thanks very much. Appreciate that.